Yo, what's good YouTube? This is a review of the Steelseries QCK Speed. And this mousepad really did change my aim. This is not a clickbait, but obviously I did and experimented with things while using the pad that I'll get into that really changed my aim. It should be obvious that no product without proper use and experimentation will improve your aim or performance by any means. So what really makes this pad so special? It is just a Steelseries mousepad, right? I think a lot of us have experience with like one crusty QCK Heavy that we all used like 10 years ago for like 3 years straight and never cleaning it, and then we just kind of got an Artisan and never looked back. So why is it even worth mentioning? Why don't we just move on to Artisan? Well, Steelseries has really adapted to the competition and made the Performance Series mousepads to catch up. The Speed variant takes after the Artisan Raiden, known as a super smooth and fast cloth pad, the fastest of cloth pads. So like I was saying, since Artisan took over, why not just skip to the Raiden? Well, first, others experienced with both pads claim that this Steelseries pad is actually the faster of the two. Secondly, it has a modest price of $40 US, and the ability to purchase at US retailers with return options is another massive benefit. If you're just getting into speed pads or introducing them to a beginner or a friend, would you rather have them import an Artisan pad for $70 to $80 US? Or just recommend them to get the pad from the brand that sells at Best Buy for just $40? I think the answer is clear. There are trade-offs that I'll get into, but it's really up to just Steelseries to deliver with this pad, so let's see how it stacks up. The surface is slick, smooth, speedy, just like the Raiden. The stitch edges are level with the pad, the best I've seen on a pad that doesn't have an Artisan logo on it. And the base is a neoprene-like foam. The foam is probably the least premium part of the pad, however it sticks on my glossy and matte table with no issues even on the matte table. You don't need the tape method I've shown you before to get this to stick on matte tables, so in a sense it actually outperforms the Artisan pour-on. Where this does lag behind, in my opinion, is the premium humidity resistance that Artisans have with the pour-on. I don't think this is like officially tested with like minimizing a bunch of variables. What I mean by that is, can you take an Artisan surface and put it on a foam base, and take the same Artisan surface and put it on a pour-on base and see which one is more humidity resistant? So for now, I've just been kind of assuming with a bunch of use that the Artisan pour-on is responsible for the humidity resistance of the pad. It just happens to be like that in my experience, along with other pads that I've tried from LGG that also use Japanese pour-on. The base on the pad is more like the Vaxi PA or the Zowie GSRSE, and obviously, you know, these are kind of more associated with slowdowns over time and depending on the weather. I feel like that's present here. I have been using this in varying weather, some heat, some cold, and it does definitely feel faster in the cold. To combat this, you can kind of get a sleeve that covers your wrist and palm areas so that you don't get any of your hand sweat on the pad, increasing the humidity on the surface. If that is a bit too nerdy for you, I do recommend getting a little USB fan that you can plug into your PC and just have next to your setup, so you can eliminate some of that humidity buildup that does happen while you play. In terms of changing my aim, well, I'll just say with full self-awareness, I've been sort of a low sense crutch kind of player over the years. And I've just been kind of abusing, ergo mice, use a palm claw grip, and then use a much lower sense, and even using standard cloth pads just to prioritize winning individual duels, rather than utilizing movement and tapping into outplay potential in my playstyle. An ergo mouse matters because this will complement the low sense playstyle. If you just have your palm on an ergo mouse, which you don't have to be fair, you're going to get little to no finger movement in your micro adjustments. It's just going to be all wrist and all arm. You can even see in these older gameplay clips I have lying around, I look decent, maybe even cracked in some of these clips. However, this isn't a sustainable playstyle for me anymore. Low sense is obviously going to shift a bunch of gaming related pain to your arms and shoulder, which is starting to be much more inhibiting for me than the wrist and hand issues ever were. Feels like for me, wrist and hand issues can be alleviated by taking breaks, doing stretches and exercises, whereas constantly putting stress on your shoulder could just lead to surgery over time, which I definitely don't want. I might also have pre-existing conditions that led to me having a bad right shoulder, and obviously gaming related injuries could lead to surgery on your wrists and hands as well, don't get me wrong. But in my experience, like I said, exercises and stretches goes a long way where that doesn't even feel like it's in the realm of reality, So I've really been forcing myself to main this pad, maining dot skates, even trying ambidextrous mouse, even though I've been much more accustomed to ergonomic mice, and really doing a lot of aim training and combating the underlying lack of finger and wrist control to give my arm and shoulder a much needed break. As for the results, it's been pretty successful. The speed pad gives you just enough cloth pad feel to give you the stopping power while being the fast of its class, and utilizing dot skates and looser grips on my mice are forcing me to be aware of all the forces I put on my mouse as well. Even some of these gameplay clips are Kovacs VODs, not gameplay VODs. And if you notice, I am hitting some master scores on these Voltaic S5 benchmarks. And while they are just the intermediate variants, I'm definitely not getting cracked on the advanced variants yet. But remember that I'm doing some of these runs on precision tracking on 25 cm per 360, which is a very high sense, and this is just placing an insane amount of focus on my wrist and finger dexterity for someone who has been obviously crutching my wrist and arm sense on most games. So as kind of a low sense crutch player and a reviewer that didn't use much gameplay in their reviews, I just honestly hope to make a full transition to higher sensitivities. In these clips with higher sensitivities, I'm definitely not as good as I was on lower sensitivities, but I can definitely play a lot more, and I can honestly see my improvement from day to day, week to week, etc, etc. So I really just hope to make that full transition, you know, alleviate shoulder pain, play for longer periods of time, and then obviously for reviews, use more gameplay in my reviews because I can play more. And you know, as for the rest of the pad, I'd say after a heavy month of use, the pad is still great and I'm looking forward to mating it, but it has slowed down a little, just to let you know. But I think this is normal, as a lot of people have the same thing to say about the Raiden. The Raiden comes out very slick, but obviously starts to slow down and have like a little middle ground that gets closer to a Hien or a Otsu. I think this is really similar. This is close to my Hien that has been getting pretty crusty, I'm not gonna lie, while still giving me everything I need for, you know, consistent micro adjustments, consistent high sense tracking, and it still gives you enough speed to be very consistent with your micro adjustments, which is crucial for higher senses and playing aim training scenarios that are very hard to hit high scores on. So obviously, while I've had a really great experience and really changed my mindset in terms of aiming and gaming on this pad, it isn't perfect. Like I said, the humidity resistance could use some work, but the sleeve and the fan can get you a long way in terms of avoiding that humidity, especially if you have sweatier hands like I do. Furthermore, it has slowed down, but again, cloth is cloth and cloth will slow down. It's just nice that it's already so fast to begin with that even with a slowdown over a month of heavy use, it still is good enough for, you know, very hard aiming scenarios and aim training that require really good micro adjustments. The only pads I would be interested in moving forward at this point would be the Artisan Raiden itself, the Artisan Key 83, and maybe glass pads. As for the Raiden, it would just be a more premium version of this pad, although according to the community, a bit slower. I would just like to see if that pour-on does make a difference in terms of humidity resistance. The Key 83 wouldn't be as fast according to reviews I've seen. I'm not entirely sure about the mid variant, I've heard that is very fast. But it would get rid of the XY differential that is present in this pad and presumably the Raiden as well. On these super fast pads like the Raiden and the QCK Speed, this XY differential can actually be really jarring, especially when variables like arm humidity, environment humidity, and pad wear are going to be pretty bad. For this, the Key 83 would be interesting as, you know, it has the new hex weave and it's said to eliminate the XY differential for the most part. And finally, glass pads. While they are kind of divisive in the community, this would just be, you know, accentuating my discovery of utilizing like all muscle groups of aiming to a much finer degree and be even less forgiving than this pad, because while this pad is super fast, it is still forgiving inherently as a cloth pad. Furthermore, you know, glass pads would also solve the same XY issues that I talked about with the Key 83. But that's really it for my review and how this pad really changed my aiming and mindset going forward. I recommend this because, you know, the stitching and the surface are really elite, artisan level, whereas the base is the only thing that's lacking in my opinion. It would obviously be better with pour-on, but I understand that's not really feasible if, you know, for like bigger companies focused in the United States. That being said, that's like the one compromise with everything else being elite on this pad, and it comes with a $40 price tag that can be returned and bought in stores in the States, as opposed to the Raiden alternative that can cost you around $80, slower shipping, no returns obviously, and honestly I hate to mention it, but in the United States if you want to import it, it could cost whatever these days, depending on the mood of the White House. But yeah, that's it. Let me know what you think. Looking forward to using, you know, faster skates, faster mouse pads going forward, and letting you guys know how does it transform your aim.